Good morning, afternoon, or evening, cats and dogs. This video is going to come from the lesson 5.8 guided notes. So please make sure you have those notes in front of you and you're copying the work down as we go through these problems. This is only going to focus on the first part of this lesson, which won't be on your mid-unit quiz, but will be on your unit test. And that's going to be identifying the greatest common factor, or GCF, for a pair or 3 or 4 numbers. So let's begin by identifying the greatest common factor, or GCF. The GCF is the largest number, greatest, that is a factor of 2 or more numbers. So you have to have an understanding of what factors are versus multiples. Factors are numbers that when we multiply them will give you the number that we're discussing or talking about. So they're going to be smaller than or equal to the number, not larger. If you're thinking of numbers that are larger, like if I'm thinking of the multiples of 12, that would be 12, 24, 36, etc. Those are going to be the same as or larger than the number. We're looking for numbers that are smaller, like 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So whenever I'm trying to identify the greatest common factor, I think it's helpful to think, does the smaller number go evenly into the larger number? If so, then the smaller number will be the greatest common factor. If that's not the case, I find factors of the smaller number, even both numbers, and determine if they're also factors of the larger number. So for example, if I'm asked to find the GCF, or greatest common factor, of 24 and 60, I know that 24 doesn't evenly go into 60. So one option is to list the factors of your smaller number, because there's usually less of them, or it's easier to do. So factors of 24 include 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 24. Back in elementary school, you might have actually made a rainbow over these, like pairing up 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, numbers that multiply to give you 24. And then, of course, 4 and 6 would be the center of the rainbow. When I go through this list, I know that 24 doesn't go into 60 evenly, but 12 does. In fact, it goes into 60 exactly 5 times. So I know that 12 is my greatest common factor. One way to check to see, did you choose the greatest common factor, is take the number that you think is the greatest common factor, or GCF, and take each of your numbers, 24 and 60, and divide them by that number. So if I take 60 and I divide it by 12, I get 5. And if I take 24 and I divide it by 12, I get 2. So I know that I get a whole number, which is what I want, because if I don't get a whole number, then it's not a factor. But I also want to look at the two quotients that I get, 2 and 5. And as long as there's nothing else I can still divide them by, I know that that indeed is my greatest common factor. So it confirms that 12 is my GCF. If, let's say, I chose 6 instead, 60 divided by 6 is 10. I'm just going to type this down here at the bottom, is 10. And 24 divided by 6 is 4. And 10 and 4 still both divide by 2. So that tells me that maybe 6 is not my greatest common factor. In fact, it will not be my largest common factor. You do also have the option of listing all of the factors of both numbers, and then just finding the largest number that's on both lists. And that happens to be, I'll highlight it in yellow, that happens to be 12. That's on both lists here. Okay. This does take practice, but it is something coming into Math 7 or coming into 7th grade or pre-algebra, you should kind of already be familiar with. So this should really just be a review for us. So example 2. This one asks us to find the greatest common factor, or GCF, of 4 and 8. Since 4 goes into 8 evenly, I know that 4, my smaller number, is my greatest common factor. Again, I can double check this by taking 4 divided by 4 to get 1, 8 divided by 4 to get 2, and knowing that there's nothing that I can divide both 1 and 2 by, besides 1, of course, I know that 4 is my greatest common factor. So let's try some examples. In number 1, I have 21 and 27. Think about what the largest number is that both 21 and 27 divide by. If it helps to think of the factors of 21, that would be 1, 3, 7, and 21. What number is also a factor of 27? If you're thinking 3, you are correct. And a way to check is take 21 divided by 3 to get 7, 27 divided by 3 to get 9, and 9 and 7 don't divide by anything besides 1. So I know 3 is my greatest common factor. What about 12 and 48? Does 12 go into 48 evenly? Yeah, it does. It goes in exactly 4 times. So what does that tell me? It tells me that 12 is my greatest common factor. Number 3, 18 and 24. What's the largest number that both 18 and 24 divide by? If you're thinking 3, think a little bigger. The answer for this one, hopefully you're thinking, is 6. 18 divided by 6 is 3. 24 divided by 6 is 4. And there's nothing that both 3 and 4 divide by besides 1. If you were just trying to divide both 18 and 24 by 3, you'd get 6 and 8, which still both divide by 2. So you know it's not your greatest common factor. Now on number 4, we've got 3 numbers, 6, 12, and 15. What do all 3 of them divide by? If you're thinking 3, you are absolutely correct. 6 divided by 3 is 2, 12 divided by 3 is 4, 15 divided by 3 is 5. And there is nothing that all 3 numbers divide by besides 1. Number 5, 25 and 100. What's the greatest common factor of those 2 numbers? If you're thinking 25, you're correct, because 25 goes into 100 evenly 4 times. And if I take 25 divided by 25, I get 1. If I take 100 divided by 25, I get 4. So my greatest common factor is indeed 25. What about number 6, 20 and 25? What's the largest number they both divide by? If you're thinking 5, you are correct. 20 divided by 5 is 4. 25 divided by 5 is 5. The largest number they both divide by is 5. All right, number 7, 49 and 56. What's the largest number they both divide by? Well, 49 only has a few factors. It's 1, 7, and 49. And since 7 goes into 56 evenly, 7 is our greatest common factor. You can check this though. 49 divided by 7 is 7. 56 divided by 7 is 8. And 7 and 8 only divide by 1. Number 8, 45 and 54. What's their greatest common factor? Hopefully you are thinking 9. Both 45 and 54 divided by both 45 and 54 divide by 9, if I can talk. 45 divided by 9 is going to be 5. 54 divided by 9 is going to be 6. And the only number they divide by besides 1, or the only thing they divide by both, is 1. All right, so very short video on this, but it's something I wanted to go through now because we are eventually going to build on this and practice factoring expressions. And in order to factor expressions, we need to be able to find the greatest common factor. So hopefully you watch this video. Hopefully you can identify the greatest common factor without really having to show much work. And then we'll build on this later again to factor expressions. Thanks for listening.